Available now on Blu-ray from Severin Films is a movie I'd never heard of, and boy, I'm going to make sure a lot of people have heard of this as I go forward in life. This is No One Heard the Scream from director Eloy de la Iglesia. It's the early 70s Spanish giallo, basically. It opens with our female lead in Piccadilly Circus in London, and it is that alone. I was saying as I was watching this, if this is 60 to 90 minutes of this woman just wandering around and looking in store windows at this moment in time in a transfer that looks this good, I'm absolutely fine with that. This was a disc I got for free, but honestly, if it looked as good as it did, and it was just her wandering around that moment in time in London with all those amazing clothes and signage and storefronts in glorious HD, and I had paid for this Blu-ray, I probably would be okay with it. Which is not a wonderful, which is not to say that the rest of the movie isn't good. It just opens and it immediately had me hooked because it's a time and place I find very visually appealing, and the transfer on this is so good that it was just like, wow, you want to pause it and just like read all the signs and look at the clothes and all that other stuff. So basically the story here is our lead goes back to her apartment, and I believe it is set in Spain. I think it starts off in England, if I recall, and then she goes back to Spain. But she's in her apartment one night. She runs into this sort of awkward neighbor guy and says hello, and then later she hears a commotion through the wall next door. This man lives with his wife next door. And she opens the door to see what's going on in the hallway, and she sees him basically holding her feet, about to drop his we really presume deceased wife down an elevator shaft. I say we presume deceased because I don't think he's going to drop. I don't think she's willingly letting him hang her by her ankles down an elevator shaft. Anyway, the woman runs back in her apartment and is just like, wow, I just watched a neighbor who has apparently just killed his wife about to dump the body down an elevator shaft. He starts pleading with her through the wall to, I can explain, which is, first of all, anytime in a movie somebody is caught red-handed doing something really nefarious and they say, I can explain, it's always hilarious because it's like, what is your explanation for this? So he says, I can explain. She's like, yeah, how about no? And eventually he works his way into an apartment and holds her at gunpoint. And then the film becomes, to sort of compress this a little bit, the film becomes him sort of holding her captive, saying, we're in this together, you're a witness to this. She helps him sort of dispose of the body, which leads to some wonderfully tense sequences. And where does the movie go from there? How does she eventually escape this guy? Does she get incriminated with him? Does he get away with it? They seem to start to form a bond, which is really weird. And is she just doing that to survive this? Because for all she knows, she could be next. Excuse me, tremors. Or is she really falling for this guy, which is bizarre. This movie was really, really good. This is, again, Severin Films is able to dig up these films. This is the U.S. Digital disc debut, so it's not been on DVD or Blu-ray in this country before. And where has this movie been all my life? Again, not a towering classic of European cinema, but a really good thriller that I had never heard of. And immediately, Severin, and we'll be talking about this in future reviews, Severin has released some other Eloy de Iglesia films. And again, he's a director I'd never heard of, as far as I know. And I've got a couple more discs I'll be talking about soon. But if they're, I've got a stack of movies to talk about. But after watching No One Heard the Scream, I'm inclined to just put those at the top of the list. Like, I really want to see his other films, and are they as good as this? Because it was just this wonderfully tense thriller where it makes you giggle some of the situations they're in they're so close to getting caught, and how the hell are they going to explain their way out of that body in the trunk, and why it's leaking, why the car's leaking some red fluid. So yeah, it looks great. It's a wonderful transfer, and it's that early 70s Euro look that I like. And the soundtrack is this wonderful kind of, funky fuzz guitar kind of soundtrack that was typical of the era that I find really rather wonderful. Extras are limited to, and it's not limited by any means, it's a 25-minute retrospective on the director, which is great because as a director I didn't know. So it's a 25-minute dive into his work and his history, and boy, I can't recommend this one highly enough. If you like the new spate of sort of new to a lot of us giallos and Euro thrillers that some of these really cool specialty labels have been putting out, I recommend throwing this one on your stack because Severin's No One Heard the Scream was a really pretty wonderful surprise to me.